Houston, this is Political Playlist here. We're orbiting out here in news universe, and we just wanted to say from our window, Congress looks to be older than the Apollo program. So pour a drink, playlisters, because we're bringing you into our group chat about politics and the next generation of political leaders in this country. This is Political Playlist Happy Hour.
Welcome to Political Playlist.
All right, are we ready, guys?
Happy Hour.
Happy hour.
We fucked that up so bad.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to Political Playlist Happy Hour. I'm Michael Kristoff.
I'm Anna Muskie-Goldwyn.
I'm Anthony Barquette.
That was a cute opening.
The theme is space, guys.
The theme is space.
Before we get to any of the nonsense happening here on planet Earth, let's start with outer space. Holy shit, at the time of record here...
Are they still out of contact?
They have just come back into contact. Okay. And Artemis 2 has set a new record of flying 252,756 miles away from Earth. It's the farthest that human beings have traveled into space. This beats the previous record held by Apollo 13, which was April 6th of 1970, which is kind of wild. We're now obviously April 6th of 2000. So
it's almost like they planned that or something.
It's kind of like we have math nerds behind the wheel.
Can I give you guys a fun feminist fact about all of this? And I'm not just saying this because my beloved UCLA Bruins won the women's national title.
Oh, God. Don't worry. We can cut this. We can cut this for time.
I mean, they have to explain why I'm wearing the hat.
I just thought it was a bad hair day. Go on.
It kind of is. But Artemis in Greek mythology is the sister to Apollo. And the reason that they named it Artemis is because it's like the first woman going this far in space. So
that's cool. Great. That was a good fact.
That's really cool.
Actually,
that was a good. You know what? Note to our editor: don't cut that part. That was actually good.
Yeah, that was nice. Have you guys seen some of the photos that have come out?
It's
incredible.
Amazing.
Yeah,
I know. I mean, my favorite was probably the one that showed Kristi Noem's husband's large boobs. And they could actually see them from space. It was incredible.
His breastplate just floating in outer space.
I was like, whoa, they're that
way to get
big.
that in there.
Playlisters, we had an internal drinking game going, and the competition was to see if before minute 3, Anthony could work in Kristi Noem's husband's boobs into the conversation, and he did.
Success.
So, Anna
Congratulations.
And I will drink.
I know that was pretty solid. That was
very solid.
I honestly didn't know where you were going.
I didn't either, actually.
I thought you guys so did. Like, you see some of those photos, you're like, wow.
Yeah, right.
Well, on a more earnest note, before we get to the shit show of news that we're going to talk about, did you guys see this amazing video where they radioed in? This was, I think, like earlier today. We're recording this on Monday. That they're naming one of the craters on the moon after the late wife of the captain.
Yes. Oh, very cool.
Very
cool. So like, and the the guy who rated him was the Canadian guy who isn't the captain. I think I forget what because I think the other guy's the pilot. Anyway, and he radioed in and was like, we have we want to request to name this crater that we're looking at Carol. And then you saw them all hug and like a group hug in space. It was very cute.
It is. I was watching my beloved cable news prior to this, and they had on Neil deGrasse Tyson. He was actually on CNN, and he made a comment. It was actually really funny because he accidentally like cursed and like then caught himself and was like so clearly like oh my God, I'm so sorry. But he was like, if we could just get all of the politicians on Earth up to space to see that point of view, these sons of bitches would stop. And he was like, oh shit. And like, you could tell he was like, oh my God. And Aaron Burnett was like, well, you're not wrong. If these SOBs could see from up there, they might have a better perspective.
I agree, Neil.
Politics.
I agree.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Well, I think before we get into what we're going to talk about on this episode, I do want to say that I think a real glimmer of great news to come out of the weekend was this story. I don't know if you guys have been following the story about the 2 downed U.S. pilots.
Oh my God, as a husband who is obsessed with aviation YouTubers, trust me, I have been following it.
Yes. Well, I'm pleased to report that there was a successful rescue mission of the second pilot, and it was pretty incredible. Maybe we'll do a video on this. And I'll give you this sort of very short abridged version, which is that through a combination of like drone surveillance, military flyovers, and this big CIA distraction plan that they launched, and survival tactics of this pilot who climbed 7,000 feet up a ridge in a mountain
Wow,
and
I didn't
hid
know
in a
that.
crevasse with a broken ankle, by the way. Like, I can't wait to see who this guy is. Like, yeah, pretty wild. And apparently he's not young. He's like in his 40s, they're
That's
saying.
amazing.
Which actually, let me take that back. As a 40-year-old, that's super young. So he's great.
I was just about to say that.
Yeah. Anyway, through
He's
all
ancient.
of this,
He's over
like
40.
the CIA launched an on-the-ground like distraction campaign where they fed assets like false intelligence. SEAL Team 6 and a whole bunch of air power went in, rescued this guy. So that was pretty amazing.
Yeah. Well, I think I will just say, and I said this to Billy earlier, like, because Billy actually was making the same comment that he was like, have you seen like how they got this guy out? And I think what has been so clear is that the U.S. military is very good at what they do, and they deserve credit for that.
Yeah.
But military might doesn't mean anything if you don't have the strategy to use it effectively. And I think that is like the disconnect that we're seeing at present time, is that no one is saying that the military should not be funded and congratulated and pushed for and whatever, for what they're doing and doing in many regards successfully. But there's like a missing piece of using that skill and tenacity and, pointing to this man specifically, willpower. If there's no strategy to back it up, then it feels like a waste.
Well, let me make a suggestion, which is that we talk about this next week.
Okay.
Because I think it's a fascinating topic. And I think that there's so many different angles, and you're so right. And I feel like this should be a great topic for next week.
Okay.
Because you're totally right.
But bringing things back to the homeland, quite literally for the three of us.
Homeland, our home state. Guys, how to talk about this California governor's race. My God, where to start? Let me tell you where I want to start. I want to start with, can you guess how many names are going to appear on the primary ballot, which will be held this coming June the 2nd? Any guess?
I think it's
how many
12.
names? Anthony?
I'll go under 12.
Okay. 61 names
are
going to appear on the ballot. Yes, for governor. And this is not a sketch. This feels like a made-up Bill Maher segment. I want to read you some of these names that have officially gotten on the ballot.
How did they get on the ballot? I thought you had to like have a certain qualification to
you
get
have
on
to
the
get
ballot.
like signatures and like, so this is according to the Secretary of State, the official certified list of candidates is 61 names, including Barack D. Obama Shaw, who's a Democrat business owner. Here's another name.
We need to have some higher standards here.
David Zickifosi. He's a Republican real estate investor. We have first name Living for God, middle name and country, last name DeMott. He is a logistical professional and a chaplain. No party preference. And I'm not kidding you. Like, spend 5 minutes looking through this list of names is so wild.
Okay.
But I thought there was only 10 Democrats officially made it onto the ballot, I thought.
Well, these are all of the names that are going to appear on the ballot, according to the Secretary of State.
Guys, it's a shit show. This
has been certified. The 26th of March, I believe, is when the list closed to officially declare your candidacy. So this is what we have.
So do you want me to tell you? Want me to tell you about the names that matter? I guess.
Yes, tell me about the names. So those are the names that don't
You mean
matter.
that living for God and country
Yes.
doesn't
That's-
Demott doesn't matter?
I mean,
Yes.
Anthony's gonna go on a rabbit hole on that name later.
We have
but,
10 serious names on the ballot.
yeah.
I thought it was 10 Democrats and 2 Republicans, though.
Well, it's really 8.
Okay,
8
let's let
Democrats,
Anthony
2
tell us, because
Republicans.
clearly
Yeah,
we don't know what we're
let
talking
me
about.
talk, okay? God, Jesus, living for
Ugh.
God. Anyways, so there's no
country.
clear and country. There's no clear leader right now. The most likely outcome, I think, is it's going to be one Democrat and one Republican. So the big news that came out today, before I get into the names, is Donald Trump, our president, endorsed one of the Republican candidates. His name's Steve Hilton. He's a former British government aide, and he's also a former Fox News host.
Loves those Fox News hosts.
Yeah. So the main candidates that people are talking about on the Republican side are Steve Hilton, and who I just mentioned, and Chad Bianco, who is the Riverside County Sheriff. And then there's another guy named Leo Zaki. He's a food company executive. But it's really been between those two Republicans. People are very surprised Trump just endorsed Steve Hilton, because that actually frees up a lot of money that would have been spent on Chad Bianco. So people are saying he's going to be out of the race. On the Democratic side, is quite crowded. We have Eric Swalwell. He's a current U.S. congressman who was he came on our podcast and we did an interview with him. Katie Porter, she's a former U.S. congresswoman from California. We have Tom Steyer, the billionaire activist who, for God,
old Sty Dog.
I'm almost like, just give him a win so we stop seeing him in
I
elections.
have so much to say about Tom Steyer.
Yeah.
Don't
Okay.
even worry.
Okay. We have Javier Becerra, who's the former HHS secretary and former California attorney general. We have Antonio Villaraigosa, who's a former LA mayor. Betty Yee, she was the former state controller. I believe she's the state treasurer as well. And Tony Thurmond, California school superintendent. And then Matt Mahan, who's the San Jose mayor, who's actually getting a lot of love from billionaires right now. So maybe, Anna, before you get into your talking, I just kind of want to say where everything.
Get into my talking.
Well, I know you're
great.
I know you're
That's
really
great.
gonna go off here, but so Hilton, who's the Republican, Steve Hilton, was polling in like the 16 to 70% range. Like, this poll was just taken by Berkeley, so he was actually technically in the lead. Yet Bianco, who was polling right under him at about 12 to 14%. And then you had Steyer, Swalwell, and Katie Porter about 10% each. Many voters are still undecided. Most people aren't talking about it right now.
That's why we're doing this episode, by the way, because people do need to be talking about it.
And before we get into it, I think it's important to mention to our listeners, before Anna gets into her talking, California is unique, and they do something called a jungle primary, which everyone in this state is familiar with, but if you're outside of California, you might not be, which is that the top 2 finishers of the primary, regardless of party, are the ones who make it onto the final ballot in November. So we could see 2 Democrats, as is often the case in California. We could see a Democrat and Republican. And what a lot of polls are showing right now is there is a real possibility that this ultra blue state, or so says Fox News, could see 2 Republicans on the ballot in November. So, this jungle primary, I think, is something that has been very popular and successful for California. Is not something, even if it were to happen that 2 Republicans got on the ballot, I don't think the state legislature or anything would change that here. Californians seem to be very proud of that jungle primary, but it's a very interesting way of doing things. And I think it's very egalitarian from the standpoint that, it does kind of take out party. It kind of negates the need to really be party affiliated in this state. And it kind of says, okay, who did the best? You 2 advance.
Well, and I think it was always kind of intended, because California has always been such a super majority blue state, that really what it was intended to do was to say, okay, well, if we're going to give you two choices, because most people are Democrats, we want to give two versions of the left for people to be choosing between. And now apparently there are 60 versions of the left, and Democrats are shooting themselves in the foot a little bit, or just like shooting into the air and not knowing what they're hitting. Because I think that it's one of those things. Let me start my talking.
Oh boy!
So
can I just start the clock too, or what?
Can I just say really quick before you start that, when you said there's 60 versions of Democrats on the left, I was like, that no wonder there's so many genders on the left.
That's good. That's good.
All right, Christy Noem's husband's boobs. We get where your head's at today.
Can we talk a little bit about what these candidates are kind of like? Who's sort of
so I wanted to talk specifically about the Democrats, because that's where my gripe is in all of this. And I'm making this personal because I think that I do think more people should be talking about this. And I think as a California Democrat, I just feel very disappointed in how all of this has played out.
Go off, Queen.
And I'll touch on the two Republican guys. So
great, gotta give them their flowers
for love of God and country.
For love of God and country.
They're gonna be in there.
So as Anthony said, the top three Democratic candidates right now are Congressman Eric Swalwell, former Congresswoman Katie Porter, and billionaire activist Tom Steyer. So I first want to talk about Swalwell because, as Anthony mentioned, we had him on our show. Really some interesting news that has come out about Swalwell recently. On one hand, you have Kash Patel is now pushing to release files on the Swalwell ties to a Chinese spy, even though no charges were ever filed against Swalwell in this instance. So you might remember a few years ago, it was uncovered that Eric Swalwell had this woman named Christine Fang who was working as a volunteer to raise money for his congressional campaign. However, in 2015, when there was a briefing to both him and other members of Congress about Chinese efforts to infiltrate Congress, Swalwell cut ties with this woman, and that is why no charges were ever filed. Republicans obviously wanted to make a big deal of this. It kind of fizzled out. Now Kash Patel is trying to release these files with some redactions, and this is something that's very rare for the FBI to do. And so Swalwell is basically coming out and saying, this is kind of like a hunt against me, because he's the one that seems to be surging in the polls a little bit. He has Senator Adam Schiff's endorsement, which is a very important endorsement in the state, longtime politician from Los Angeles. And right now, as I said, he's the favored person to win. And he did have this quote that I wanted to bring up where he said, because I think this is very Swalwell vibe, that he said, what Trump wants most is to have a Western White House, an enabler on the opposite coast. A lot of people have bent the knee to this administration, but I will not, and neither will the people of California. And so I think that this FBI news actually helps Swalwell, because it kind of galvanates people around him as an anti-Trump figure, which likens him to Newsom, who won by a lot when he won for governor. However, the other piece of news circulating around Eric Swalwell right now is that a young woman named Cheyenne Hunt, who is an attorney who runs a left-wing advocacy group called Gen Z for Change, posted a reel highlighting a text that she got from a former Swalwell staffer, and noted that she had received many other texts and notes like this from other people that she knows who have had an experience with Swalwell where he was essentially exploiting young female staffers, sexually harassing them, and often making them sign NDAs in the process. And I will say that I did have a conversation with a female friend of mine who used to work in DC in this world, and confirmed that this is sort of something that he is known for. This has not broken into mainstream news yet. This is something that's circulating very much on the internet, and specifically amongst very, on the left. And I think that, everyone deserves their day in court. And I'm not here to say that this is signed, sealed, delivered. But I think that, we're kind of in an era specifically for Democratic politicians where you can't just expect that you can be shitty towards young women that work for you and think that you're just going to sail into a governorship. So if this is true, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I think a few things jump out at this whole thing. First of all, I think the FBI files and that whole play seem like a very calculated smear campaign by the administration And I think, frankly, that whole incident, I remember we, followed it at the time. It really seemed to be a big nothing burger from
Totally.
the standpoint that, he had met this woman a few times. She clearly was a Chinese spy, or it came out that she was a Chinese spy. He cut ties. He cooperated with the FBI, and that was it. And I think that, the Republican Fox News media has really tried to hang that around him. Now, I think what's interesting to note is that the woman was a woman named Fang Fang, who was a very attractive young woman. And so, in espionage parlance, the term is honeypot, where you use your sort of sexual advances to curry a source. And so, I think when you look at that on its own, you might think, okay, fine. But now when you bring in this other piece of it, right, it seems like, okay, well, perhaps a plausible sequence of events here was that this woman was a spy and she was a honeypot. She was, using this trap to kind of try and get an intelligence source.
I've been
here.
called
yeah.
Anthony's like, I've been honeypotted so many times.
And
or
so
I
I
was
think
maybe the honeypot. Yeah.
I think, there's two interesting things to look at with regard to that, to this whole thing. One is, I think the FBI releasing files empowers him within the Democratic base. However, with what you're saying, this sort of new reporting about some possible misconduct and misdeeds and whatnot, maybe more, I think that empowers somebody like a Katie Porter, who is a very progressive Democrat, and she is kind of trailing and kind of hovering in this fourth position. I mean, a lot of the polling suggests that among the Democrats, Swalwell is in the lead in most polls, but not by much. And so that kind of thing, I think, gives her ammunition to certainly go after him and make the case for her. And mind you, Adam Schiff endorsing Swalwell, Schiff ran against Katie Porter, and they had a vicious fight for the battle for the Senate. And Adam Schiff ultimately won. So
let's hear about
certainly
Katie
no
Porter
love
then.
lost
Here's
there.
Here's the thing, though, is I think in theory, when you talk about identity politics, what you're saying makes sense. There's potential allegations that he's been inappropriate with women. The leading female candidate suddenly has a lot of ammunition. However, we all may remember a couple months ago, video came out of Katie Porter being, to just be blunt about it, really fucking shitty to her staffers and interviewers.
Horrible.
And again, actually, people I have spoken to who have worked in this world confirm that she was sort of notoriously mean. And are we
allowed to say bitch on this podcast?
You know what? I'll give you
just
permission
did.
in this sense. But I think what's so, like, for me as a fellow lady, I'm kind of like, I very much understand this thing of like, we can't hold women to a different standard, right? But I think that there are plenty of men who are assholes to the people who work for them. I also think they should be held accountable. I just don't think that people should be mean. And so I think that what, unfortunately for her, is as much as this might be ammunition to use against Swalwell, there's a very similar ammunition to use against her. It's maybe not quite as potent, because I think being mean to your staff is not illegal. It's just not, in good grace. But so I think she's someone where I also feel I don't see a lot of ads from her. I don't feel a lot of energy from people that I talk to. I don't find her to be as visible as Swalwell and Steyer amongst either conversations or like on the internet and stuff like that. Which brings me to Tom Steyer. So do you have anything to say about Katie Porter before I talk about Tom Steyer?
The only thing I would add on Katie Porter is that everybody I've talked to who has dealt with her says that she is awful to deal with. And I think that, when you look at her tenure in elected office, it hasn't really been that great. I mean, she was a congresswoman. She then, decided to run for Senate, was unsuccessful, is now running for governor. We'll see. But, it strikes me as like these politicians who seem to sort of fail and then fail upwards. It's like when you lose a big race, what do? Oh, run for a bigger race. Like, for me,
Well,
I don't understand what
and
the
what's frustrating to me,
for her.
yeah, and what's frustrating to me about her, look, in what year did she get into Congress? I think it was 2020, the 2020 election,
Maybe
I believe.
2018. I think 2018.
I think it was 20. Yeah, I think it was one term before that.
Okay,
and then
so
she was after
I
that.
went and canvassed for her in this purple district in
I
California.
remember this.
Yeah, and I was very inspired by her story. She's a single mom.
She had a good story.
Really great story. Honestly, like, and seeing her in person, like very kind of like fired up and sort of the person that I was like, oh, these are like, I want more women in politics like this, right?
Yeah.
And what I then saw in Congress was a woman who was incredibly smart, had a great way of messaging. People may remember she really became famous because she would do this thing where in these hearings, she would bring in, specifically about the economy and sort of inequality, she would bring in a whiteboard and do these like simple equations on the whiteboard and would contradict whatever the person who was in the hearing was, the point they were trying to get across. She would do the math to show why they were wrong. And it was an incredibly effective communication tool. And unfortunately, to your point, it didn't work out for her in the Senate race. And I think that what I find so frustrating about it is she's lost that like every woman vibe that she had in Congress. And I don't know when exactly that was lost. Maybe it was in the Senate race. Maybe it was in the negative campaigning from Schiff against her. Like, who knows? But that woman, I think, would be a really great candidate for governor, because I think that is what California wants, is someone who's focused on the facts and who's focused on the numbers and can move the state forward in a positive way. But unfortunately, she's now kind of drowned herself in this bad publicity. And again, I don't know her personally, so like I don't know if this is all just bad PR, but PR is PR. And so people are going to believe what they hear. And so I do unfortunately see her kind of falling off as the campaigns go on, whether it's for funding or other reasons. So speaking of funding, the third Democratic candidate who is notable that we just mentioned is Tom Steyer. He is now surging past Porter, to my previous statement, and he is starting to take out attack ads against Swalwell. So Tom Steyer is a billionaire, but he was an environmental activist. He's very progressive. He wants to tax the ultra wealthy of the state. I did think he had this great tweet like back in December where he just tweeted, "Tax me more." And I think I personally am like into the message. I'm like, okay, it's sort of the opposite of Donald Trump, right? You have this billionaire guy coming in. Donald Trump wants to retain all of it. Tom Steyer is essentially saying, I've benefited from the system. Now I want to make it better for people who are not like me. But turns out even he has something going against him, because now this news is coming out that he actually had invested a ton of money in the exact offshore private equity funds that he's been railing against on the campaign trail. So
hell yeah.
So
bro.
I'm kind of like,
not that big of a deal.
Okay, so I agree, right? So I'm kind of like, he was a rich guy who was trying to make more money, and now he's trying to say, I want things to be more equitable, right? So the thing that I think so interesting about all of this is like, what is wrong with the California Democratic Party? I know that we want to all be out here saying, oh, like candidates are going to come from these grassroots movements. And sometimes they do. Sometimes you get an AOC that comes out of nowhere, right? But especially in governor's races, there is like a deep understanding of who the players are that could really fundraise, message, make a difference in the fifth largest economy in the world. Let us not forget. And it just feels like on this, the party itself has shit the bed, because they have not gone to somebody like Javier Becerra and said, okay, you're polling in like not even single digits, who, go endorse somebody, right? Like,
right.
And that should have happened months ago because now they're already on the ballot, which confuses people. And I just think it is such a failure of state leadership on the party level.
I agree. Although it's funny because I feel like, that's one of those things that with the current state of finances in politics right now, the days of like a party leader coming to a candidate and saying, hey, so-and-so, you have to drop out and coalesce behind this one person. Those days are over because these politicians have too much money. They have too much funding. They have super PACs backing them. And they're like, why would I drop out? I don't need to drop out. And losing doesn't hurt me. It only gains recognition. And so, people like Tom Steyer, I think, like, what pisses me off about him is that I feel like he could be such a great kingmaker from the standpoint of like starting a super PAC, being a donor, and instead his ego is in the way, thinking that he can run and win. I think he's weird. I think he's goofy. I think there's nothing charismatic about him. And it's like, dude, what are you doing? Get the fuck out of here.
But now
you're
I'm
not
kind
gonna
of
be
like,
governor.
am I going to vote for him because Swallow might be a sexual predator and Katie Porter's mean? Like,
okay, Michael, I will say the only thing with Tom Steyer, I'm like, this guy wants this job
so bad.
So bad.
He's run for so many races, and you're like, I'm almost at a point, I'm like, just give it to this boring ass dude.
Honestly, what we need to do, take his money, build himself a little replica Oval Office, and just fucking have Zoom calls there.
But
do whatever it takes.
Here, go ahead and say something on Tom Steyer, but I want to mention the other two Republicans.
Yeah.
Because I think it's important tie-in here.
But this is like genuinely, this is something that I genuinely am grappling with.
Yeah.
Before we do that, could we just talk a little bit more about the Democrats? Because I think there's two names.
That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about.
All right.
Something that I'm like genuinely grappling with is I feel like at some point we all have to make a choice, right? And there are plenty of Republicans in California who it seems now will have a pretty clear choice, especially if they are Trump aligned. I think both those candidates are so Trumpy that I have to imagine Hilton is really going to surge, which actually I think is going to help whatever Democrat kind of comes out on top, because the other guy is going to really drop off, like you said, Anthony. But on the Democratic side, like in all seriousness, people have to vote. That's like that's the message that we all feel deep in our bones as people who care about the political world and believe in the efficacy of politics. And at this point, unless some surprise comes out of nowhere, and the San Jose Matt Meehan's interesting, but I do think the fact that he's funded by a bunch of Silicon Valley billionaires because he's the mayor of San Jose, I don't see that taking him very far in California with the more progressive wings of this party.
Do you think that matters?
Yes, I do. I 100% do, because it's like, talk about special interests. That's the ultimate special interest in California. And so let's just say, for the sake of argument, you have 3, maybe 2 candidates now who, if this news of Eric Swalwell begins to pan out and people really are investigative about it and find that it's true, then one of these candidates is a shitty person. And if that's true, then you're left with Katie Porter, who I think there's a version of her that was really good, but has fallen from grace and doesn't seem up to the task from a personality level, at least to the 3 of us. And then you have someone like Tom Steyer, who's not appealing from a personality level and seems to have gone about this in a really bizarre way of just spending a shitload of his own money. But then you're kind of like, okay, at least this is just me talking. I'm like, okay, he seems to want, he's an environmentalist. He seems to want to keep a lot of what California has led the way on in terms of environmental policy. He wants to talk about more equitable tax structure. That's good. And at the same time, he's a businessman. So he's not coming at it from this hyper progressive activist standpoint. He understands the balance between taxing equitably, but also allowing people to make money because he himself has made money. And so then I'm thinking about it from a practical standpoint where I'm like, do I think the guy's weird? Yeah. Do I think he's desperate? Yeah. But at the same time, is he the candidate that suddenly is emerging as the most viable person because he doesn't have these skeletons in his closet and he's already, through his own funding, managed to surge so much in the polls? And by the way, I would rather have a billionaire funding his own campaign than a San Jose mayor who has 10 billionaires funding his campaign and suddenly has these interests.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm not sure I agree with that.
But like we talked about the other week, it's like he then has 10 people who essentially he's secretly answering to that none of us know.
I mean, I think that is a very classical, skeptical, big money in politics point of view, which I don't discredit. And I think that's proven to be true plenty of times. But I think when I look at this field, I don't worry about a mayor who is funded by a lot of rich people, because I see that candidate as somebody with a hell of a lot more executive experience than Eric Swalwell, Katie Porter, Tom Steyer, and the list goes on. The only one who has comparable executive experience would be Antonio Villaraigosa. And I think when I look at this
Boo.
list, I see the two strongest candidates. If I was like Democratic Party chair and this was the old cloakroom and we were having cigars and whiskey and it was like, pick your guy or gal, I would say Xavier Becerra and Matt Mahan are the two strongest candidates. And the reason is because all of my Republican friends who are Democratic curious right now, meaning they voted for Trump, don't like what's happening, are sort of open to a moderate,
Bisexual.
all are asking. Yeah, they're curious. They're damn curious. Every single one of them, and by the way, most of them are men, are all asking me, hey, what do you think of Matt Mahan? What do you think of this mayor from San Jose? They're all asking me. And then the sort of part two of that, every moderate Democrat who was sort of a Joe Biden Democrat, who is anti-far left, anti-squad, anti-Katie Porter, are all saying, why is Javier Becerra not getting more love? He is like, has this great experience. He's the former attorney general, former cabinet secretary. Like, this guy has real qualification.
But I feel like what is missing in that conversation is that this isn't a national election. This is an election in a very blue state of California. And so maybe that holds true if we're going to say, okay, let's just pretend that there's 100% chance that Steve Hilton makes it on the ballot. In that case, yeah, maybe you do need someone more moderate to really lock that in. Although I still think you're going to get California Democrats to come out and vote. So
okay,
I think
look at who didn't enter the race, right? Who didn't enter the race? Kamala Harris didn't enter the race. Rick Caruso didn't enter the race. So these are big names. So you talk about like the only name, like notoriety on this really is Eric Swalwell and Katie Porter and maybe Tom Steyer.
But I'm not saying name. I'm just saying in general, I think that what your equation is leaving out is that there are a lot of progressive Democrats in California who I think would not feel great about voting for a mayor funded by billionaires or a HHS secretary who was under Biden, that they kind of see as like a, an old time kind of old guard politician. And I think that I think what you're making is an incredible argument for moderate Democrats in California. But I think the part of that that's missing is that we live in California, and in California, you have a huge amount of progressive Democrats that are much more far left than a lot of the rest of the country.
Where are they going? Because if that was so big and such a powerful arm of the Democratic Party in California, then Katie Porter would be surging in the polls, and she's not. So who are they going to?
Well, or Tom Steyer, because I think
No.
Tom Steyer message is a progressive message, even though he himself is very wealthy.
And Katie Porter are splitting?
I think that they're splitting, and I think that Steyer is now surging ahead of her.
I agree with that statement.
Interesting.
But so all of this is going to help a Republican win.
So do you think if let's say Katie Porter drops out, do you think her vote goes to Steyer?
I do, personally,
Okay.
yeah.
And then that would put him ahead of Swalwell.
I think so. And let me tell you something interesting. So we were last night, something was on, Billy was probably watching some channel about the airplane rescues and whatever on YouTube. Tom Steyer is blowing up YouTube, by the way.
Okay, yeah.
And on YouTube, there was an attack ad against Steyer, and it was knocking him for being a billionaire and all these things that I was saying of he invested in these, offshore equity funds and whatever. Then the group who paid for that ad was the California Realtors Association. And the irony of the California Realtors Association running an attack ad, calling somebody out for being a billionaire, should not be lost on anybody, because they are finding the one line of attack against this guy, which is that he's a billionaire, even though the California Realtors Association benefits from a deregulated, more right-leaning economy in California. So what that tells me is that people are identifying Steyer as a progressive, despite the fact that he is himself incredibly wealthy. And if the California Realtors Association sees him as a threat, I think he is a threat. And I think that Swalwell is now going to have to grapple with that as the main contender on the left.
Man,
Anthony, go ahead.
I really wish you said that was paid for by his ex-wife, because that would really make a California showdown. Like his wealthy ex-wife paid for an ad. So we're not sure how believable it is or not, but it's a pretty strong attack ad.
Well,
sorry to burst your bubble.
You know, something I think worth noting here is that friend of the playlist, Alex Michelson, who's an anchor on CNN, is going to be hosting a CNN debate with Caitlin Collins with all of these Republican gubernatorial candidates a month from now. It's going to be May 5th, I believe, on CNN.
Wait, it's just Republicans?
No, I think it's going to be everybody. It's going to be.
You said Republican.
No, I said gubernatorial candidates.
Yeah. And Republican.
Democrats
and Republican. These and Republican. Yeah. Excuse me, sorry.
Yeah. Wow, take your victory pods out of your ear, you Bruin. So, you know, that'll be fun to see, because I think when you look at the polling here, there's really nobody in such a crowded field that's running away with it, right? Everybody's within a couple of points. And so
even the Republicans, by the way.
Even the Republicans, right. I mean, you know, they're both, and you have two candidates. You've got the former, or the sheriff, who's like a real law and order guy, and then you've got a real conservative in Hilton, who's like branding himself as an outsider. And, you know, debates are where these people can move. And I think with a race that's this close among so many people, debates are where candidates can really start to surge in the polls. So I think May 5th will be a real indicator of where, a real shaper, frankly, of where,
which is essentially 1 month
be.
Before I think June 2nd is the primary. So May is really going to be the month where things shift. I think we are going to see the Republicans start to shift soon because of the Trump endorsement. But I do think that the debate is going to have an effect on all these Democrats, who I also just have to say, to your point before, Michael, like about, you know, the way that funding works now and people not really being beholden to stuff. It just as a Californian, it just pisses me off, because it's like, how selfish are you? How selfish do you have to be, and how much hubris do you have to think that you can continue to excel in this race when the cards are stacked against you? And in this state specifically, if you're a Democrat, the cards aren't just stacked against you, but they're stacked against the future of the identity that your state has created. And I just think that it's an incredibly selfish thing to be, you know, in the bottom couple of these 10 really Democratic candidates and to still be in the race. I want people to be duking it out. I want people to be on the debate stage and kind of making voters understand where they come from. But as a voter, it bothers me that there are still people who are remaining in this incredibly important race for, again, the 5th largest economy in the entire world, and a state that has identified itself as one of the big anti-Trump blue states, and putting all of that kind of on the line in a way that it just feels very irresponsible to me and very indicative of where politics is now, unfortunately.
Okay, lightning round for both of you.
Wow.
Does one of the Republicans, does Bianco drop out? And what does the final ballot post-primary look like? Who's on it? Anna first.
Oh, I was going to say Anthony first.
Anthony first.
I don't think Bianco's going to drop out, but I think his poll numbers are going to tank, and then after the debate, maybe he will drop out. But it doesn't matter because he's on the ballot anyway. And then
I think Hilton's on the ballot?
I think Hilton's on the ballot, and I'm just going to continue with my guy, Tom. I think it's going to be Hilton Steyer.
Okay. Anthony?
I very much agree with Anna on this. I was going to pick Steyer as my I'm going to go with Swalwell. I think it will be Swalwell or Mahan. So,
but against Hilton.
Yes. I think Hilton's a for sure. Actually.
I think it's going to be Hilton, Swalwell, and I think Swalwell's the next governor.
Wow. Okay.
I think he's got the highest
that's what
profile.
He's banking on too.
I think he's got the highest profile, and I think at the end of the day.
And then how are you guys going to feel if there's a sexual predator as the governor of California?
Well, we'll deal with that.
For starters, the name Cheyenne.
Okay, don't get
Wouldn't be the first.
I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, speaking of California, before we go, this Thursday, we are having a continuation of our Primary Watch series. We have congressional candidate Jake Levine, who is running just north of where Michael and I live for California's 32nd District, which encompasses the Palisades, Malibu, out into the valley, a lot of fire territory, which we're going to talk about. And he is running in an active primary against the incumbent Democrat. So very excited. No, that like it's not like it's an open primary. Like he's running against the guy, he's running against the incumbent, which is very exciting. And he has been surging and raising a lot of money, and we're super excited to talk to him. So make sure you tune back in on Thursday to meet Jake.
Thursday.
All right. Thursday.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers, everybody.
Happy hour.